Hi, welcome back to Vinyl Anatomy. Today I'm excited to share my journey with the popular Seno speaker kits from Parts Express. I've always been intrigued by building speakers and audio equipment. In this video, I will not only walk you through the build process, but also provide a comprehensive guide to the Seno speaker kits, including upgrades, various finishing methods, and my tips for a successful build. I hope this video enhances your experience and inspires you to dive into the world of speaker building. Inside the kits, you will find all the essential materials, and I will also introduce optional upgrade of materials here. There are additional items and tips you will need for the upgrades. I will post the info along the way and in the description. Our first step is adding holes for dowel bracing, inspired by fellow YouTuber Veneering. I learned a lot from his build. Go check it out after the video. Here is a diagram for precise drilling. Be mindful of the depth and orientation. All measurements are in inches. To ensure accuracy, I marked each component with a center punch and taped them together in pairs, maintaining orientation to prevent confusion during the drilling process. The reason for adding the bracing is to help improve the performance of the kit's in MDF cabinet. You can use dowels as I'm doing here, or opt for a separate board for internal bracing. For gluing up the cabinet, I will demonstrate two methods. First is a more challenging but effective one, which involves using dowel bracing to connect the walls and then gluing all four sides simultaneously. It is harder because more surfaces need to be taken care of and forces from different directions are needed. It is doable, but you will need to be fast with a lot of clamps. A small tip here is to use a square and tape measure to ensure the panels are square after the clamps are set. The second method, recommended by the manual, involves gluing two panels together first and then the remaining two. This way limited both the number of surfaces you need to glue at once and the direction of forces needed to press the panels in place. The downside is that you will need a bit more time because it is a two-step process. Once the glue dries, we are moving to the surface preparation. It is one of the most time-consuming processes in this build. It is crucial to prioritize safety, ensuring proper protection for your hearing and lungs. Do not cheap out on the protection. Use a scraper, sandpaper, and sander for initial cleaning. MDF sanding generates harmful fine dust that should be avoided. Once again, you do not want to breathe it in. Choose Bondo glazing putty as my filler, knowing for its sandability and minimal cracking, but the film is highly toxic. You can see that I focus on the connecting edges of each panel, which are prone to showing imperfections. Looking back, I would start standing with 220 grits instead of 120 to avoid overworking the putty. Taking out too much putty can make you do double the work. Apply at least 3 layers of putty and sanding for a smoother finish. Patience and thoroughness in this step are key to achieving a high quality finish, regardless of your chosen finishing method. I prepared the front panels separately as I intended to use multiple finishing techniques. Here I start with the filling primer to reveal and fill the imperfections. With multiple layers of putty and sanding, you should be able to remove most orange peels. Pay special attention to the rounded corners, those are the areas with the most flaws. You want the surface to be as smooth as possible. Once again, surface preparation is the key to better results. Be patient and thorough. After finishing the cabinet, I move on to optional upgrades. This is a suggestion from JDunk54NL on the AVS forum. His documentation of his build is one of the most detailed on the internet. Ideally, if you want to cover all the interiors, 3 pieces of acoustic foam will be needed. I only have one, which is enough for all 4 side panels, and I will use other methods to further improve the performance. Next up is to put in the side bracing dowels. I use an extra dowel to push in the foam so the bracing dowel can be pushed through with ease. If you use bracing panels instead, you can avoid this hassle by separating the foam into multiple pieces. A dowel with a Japanese sole is very satisfying. Use your finger to guide the blade for a clean cut, and make sure to sand the surface as flush as possible. If I do this again, I will even add some putty to ensure its smoothness. Then we delve into the finishing process. I pick up a roll of paperback maple veneer online because I love maple and I want to achieve a look similar to B&W's 600 series. There are 2 main types of glue for veneer, contact cement and wood glue made for veneer. I choose Taiwan cold pressed veneer glue to avoid the toxic fume from contact cement. Contact cement is easier to work with in my opinion because it sticks instantly and will have 0 shifting. On the other hand, the veneer glue is more forgiving and easier to clean up. Most of the time we put glue on both contacting surfaces, but if you want to avoid wetting the paperback, it is okay to just apply the glue on the MDF cabinet. I waited a day before trimming the excessive veneer with the router and the flush bit. If unavailable, using an X-Acto knife and cutting from the back is also a method to consider. After trimming, light sanding can further refine the edges. The top and bottom panels follow a similar process. One thing to consider is the orientation of the grain. I follow a rule of having the grain go with the longer side to form a smooth and harmonious look. I clean up the excessive glue squeezed out by the pressure from the veneer as soon as possible. This can prevent the glue from being absorbed by the veneer and forming permanent marks. When flush trimming along a finished surface, I like to protect the surface with blue tape to protect the veneer. And be sure to clean off the gunk on the trimming bit to ensure a clean cut. Another tip here when cleaning is to sand downward to prevent the tool from catching the grain and tearing up the newly settled veneer. Because I added the bracing and wanted to demonstrate multiple finishings, this made this process much more complex. If you want to simplify, pick only one finishing is recommended. I also found a better way of installing the front baffle and the bracing when looking back. I should glue the front baffle first and then glue the dowels after. The front baffle is set to simplify the gluing process. Making it a 2-step process will make it easier with less shifting. An even better way is to add a lip around the inside of the front baffle to ensure a perfect alignment. An important detail here, I knew the veneer thickness would affect the dimension, which makes perfectly fitting the front baffle impossible. The right way is to cut a new front baffle based on the new dimension, but I'm too frugal to waste the existing panels. So I directed most of the imperfections toward the bottom and used the added thickness from primer and putty on the front baffle to hide the imperfections to a certain degree. Veneering the back panel follows a similar process. Cutting the dowels to flush, cleaning the surface. I also started to clean up the contacting edges between the front baffle and the veneer siding with sandpaper. One tip here is to put blue tape on the veneer before sanding because the dust from the primer and bundle putty can muddle with the veneer, which requires more sanding and cleaning. Same as before, giving the MDF enough glue and be sure to clean the excessive glue before it dries. Because all the surface areas are veneered, I highly suggest protecting it with blue tape when routing. Careful when cleaning the edges. My standard is using 120 grits sandpapers as a starting point, but if it is too much for you, starting with the 220 grits. Slower is always better than regrets. Using a center punch to create marks for drilling is a great method for a task like this. Make sure there are clean, flat backing pieces under the cabinet to prevent accidental veneer damage when poking. The pore holes are rather easy to find, so it shouldn't be a problem. Spray can handle is a must-have for spray painting without dedicated equipment. It makes spray painting 10 times easier. Highly recommended. I had to finish the cabinet twice due to my unfamiliarity with the lacquer and had to reapply the finishing with a spray can lacquer. I'm not going too deep into finishing here. If you want an easy alternative, wipe-on polyurethane is a great choice. When sanding, remember not to skip grits. This will ensure a smooth surface and actually save you time from going back and forth. I use both white spray paint and clear coating to mimic BMW's 600 series. However, I wasn't happy with the glossy effect. It looks cheap and showed more flaws than I wanted. Therefore, I ended up using matte clear coating to even out the sheen. Next up is the crossover, the brain of the speaker. Inside the kits, we have all the components we need. I added the board for a cleaner look and the 0.22 capacitors mod upgrade. This mod was to help smooth out resonate at around 8000 Hz according to the countless threads I lost track of. It's a bit tricky to make all the legs meet with the desired end, but manageable. Along with the footage, here is a diagram with the added mod and where I place it in my crossover. After setting all the components, we can start to tie the nuts with a cable and soldering. Set a temperature below 250 degrees Celsius on my cheapo soldering gun to avoid damaging the components but still be able to melt the solder effectively. Here's a finished crossover with all the connectors and labels. I've included the original diagram and the upgraded diagram with the simulated frequency response curve generated by the woofer and tweeter data from Data on Audio. To give you a reference on how the 0.22 capacitor mod is supposed to help with the Sino speakers. Based on the overlay curve, we can see that the modded crossover affects the response between 2000 Hz and 9000 Hz, making the curve a bit more flat than the original. But of course, further testing of the final speakers to verify is. Before you assemble all the components, I highly recommend testing the crossover and the speaker units to make sure everything works as intended. The final part of the build is the assembling. We start with the port tubes. Now opt for using hot glue so that if I needed to tweak the length of the port, it wouldn't be a huge problem. And because we are dealing with a finished cabinet, surface protection is a requirement at all times. When installing, you may need some cleaning and drilling for the components to fit, since the veneer glue can affect the dimensions of the holes. The installation process is simple but with small nuances, starting with pre-drilling the hole for the screws. A rule of thumb here is to use the bit that matches the stem of the screw, so the thread still has material to grab. And using a center punch before drilling to ensure a clean drill as always. A small trick here is to keep all the Phillips screws orientation consistent for even tension and a professional look. Binding posts are next. Inside the head we have the opening for bare wire, therefore the orientation of the binding post is something to pay attention to. The hole on the NDF cabinet is accommodating for the thinner part of the binding post stem and not the thicker part, which provides a strong grab with the cabinet after installation. I use a soft mallet and scrap wood to tap them in place without damaging it. I will also suggest clamping the cabinet, seeing it jumping so much in this footage. Better safe than sorry. If you want to fine-tune the orientation later, a wrench or clamp can help you dial in the perfect angle. I put a positive on the left and a negative on the right. However, I found out that most of the speakers I have on hand are the opposite. This should not affect the performance, but a small detail for you to consider. Crossover installation is tricky because of the woofer opening size. If you want to make it easier, installing crossover before setting the front baffle in place is a viable option. I jack up the whole crossover board with some scrap wood to create a flat surface so it is easier to stick. Installing the driver is probably the most exciting moment. Same as all the assembling, I put them in place and mark the drilling holes with center punch. I double tap the marks after removing the drivers, then it's time to drill. I did not drill through, but drill about half of the material thickness. Before installing the woofer, if you want to add stuffing to the speakers, this is the time to do so. I can't tell you exactly how much stuffing is optimal, since I'm still evaluating the speaker myself as well. When connecting the quick connects, I suggest lightly crimping the connectors so they can have a nice snug fit with the terminals. Do not use a power tool to tie the screw or get anywhere close to the speaker units. You won't want any accident at the last step of the build. With all the hard work behind us, let's take a look at the final result. While I showcase how good the speakers look, I am also transparent about the imperfections, particularly at the connecting edges between the front baffle and cabinet. Like I said earlier, if you wish to avoid this, consider making your own front baffles or using the same finishings is the way to go. But other than that, the speakers look fantastic and sound excellent. Here's how I set it up with my super slow 8-year-old 27-inch Intel iMac. The finished C-Note shines as a pair of near-field monitors or for a small room. They are holographic and detailed and can form a nice wide soundstage with a slightly forward-sounding character. The highs have some spark with good timbre and not fatiguing, but you can sometimes pick up tweeters distortion and a bit of shrilling when playing challenging tracks. The low is adequate for near field and small rooms with enough detail in the bass. It's not the fullest, deepest, or fastest bass you ever heard, but it is solid. One caveat I found was that the optimal listening angle for them is narrower than I would like it to be. The C-Note can sound a bit thin in a big room, which shows its limit as a pair of small bookshelf speakers. Even without further tweaking and testing, I can confidently say they are a pair of great sounding speakers and worth your time to build them. Right now, the pricing for the kit is no longer $100, and you also have to factor in the time and materials for the build, which can drive the cost up indefinitely. However, this is true for any DIY kits and not only for the C-Note. To me, this is more about the joy of making and learning in the audiophile world. I hope you have enjoyed this experience as much as I have. Please share with me your thoughts in the comments. I'm eager to learn and grow with our community. If you stay with me all the way here, I truly appreciate your time and support. Please remember to sub, like, and ring the bell so I can bring more content to you. Until next time, peace.